to today's episode of Asian American Focus. I'm your host, Judy Singh, and today we have a very special guest, Ms. Lee Burk, who is past president of the National Association of Asian American Professionals in North Carolina. And unfortunately, Hai is moving away to Boston in a few weeks, so this is a chance for us to memorialize Hai's contributions to the Asian American community as well as the greater Triangle area community. So thank you for being here today, Hai.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure. So can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and how you wound up in North Carolina?
Sure. So my family and I were refugees from Vietnam, and I moved to the Boston area when I was 3 years old, and went to high school there, went to college, and even grad school in that area. And then my now husband and I decided we were young and didn't have too many responsibilities and decided to make a big move to Hawaii. And there we had a great experience, just really in awe of, the magic of Hawaii. And then, but it was very far away from our families on the East Coast. So, but instead of, you can't go from paradise back into this really harsh, cold New England weather. So we did some community mapping of some cities, and Raleigh, Durham definitely stood out because it was at that time, and maybe still is, one of the fastest growing Asian American populations for cities. So that was very intriguing to me, and then all the universities that were around the Triangle area were also a draw to me. So we didn't know a single person here, and we just packed up and sold a lot of our stuff and just came to the Triangle with 2 suitcases, and we settled at the Extended Stay America in Durham and then built our life from there. And one of the first people we met that first weekend was actually Cindy Robinson, who is another, just amazing Asian American leader in this Triangle community at the International Festival. And she was just so warm and just so just welcoming to people who were coming to the area. And so she got me connected to NAAAP, and from there it was that's how I got connected to.
Mm-hmm. And roughly what year was it that you wound up in North Carolina?
So it was 2007.
Oh, mm-hmm. Wow. So you've been here 11 years. That does seem to be a long time. And this was before you had kids. So
yes.
That's why you and your husband, Nick, were able to pick up and move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That must have been pretty scary, too, to not know anybody there.
It was real bold and real naive. And, I think it was, I'm not sure if we could do that again without securing a job and without
so you didn't even have a job?
We didn't even have a job. We had saved a bunch of money in Hawaii, and we just trusted that it would just work out in terms of our having degrees and being in such a thriving academic setting. So I did just how many months later? Just maybe like 2 months later, got a job at Duke Raleigh Hospital and got entered into the Duke system, and been very happy since.
Yeah, and you're a social worker?
Yes, I'm a social worker in a hospital setting, and I worked in the emergency room as well as on the oncology floor, and then before I left, I was the behavioral health case manager, so focusing on mental health and psychiatric patients.
Yeah. And that's a field that needs more Asian Americans, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Were you able to use your language abilities as your job?
Well, not so much. Yeah, and not so much in terms of like interpretation or translation, but I think also just seeing an Asian American face, and even just a woman of color promoting the use of mental health services, just because we're human beings and we all suffer the same, and there's not. To just break down that stigma that I think Asian Americans sometimes have around accessing and mental health services, and even just acknowledging that clinical terms like depression or anxiety, or even so other just being more familiar with and more comfortable just acknowledging that we are human beings and we go through challenges in life, and that it's okay to access those services and feel better and move through them with help.
I see. Yeah, and when you were moving here from Hawaii, I mean, obviously the demographics are so different. I'm assuming there's lots of Asian people or people of Asian ancestry in Hawaii, as well as sort of around the Boston area. But were you apprehensive about coming to the South?
Yeah, I think I was, again, I think it falls into the whole naive piece where I didn't quite understand, the level or the history of racism in the South. And so I didn't think about it before. In Hawaii, there was so much acceptance of different aspects of your identity. You could be a Filipino, German, Hawaiian, female, and, in society you would just be acknowledged for all of those dimensions. Whereas, and then just coming here to the South, I didn't actually recognize the level of racism except, until I actually got here. And then, you can still feel the racial division and the class division here in the South.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you personally experience any discrimination while you lived here?
So I would say, I wouldn't say that there was like direct discrimination towards me around my Asian American identity. I think that it was just being in the healthcare field. I was a witness and and just experienced and stood up for people who, and it was typically an African American colleague or an African American coworker who got the microaggression towards them, and I think it was important for me to be an ally and actually stand up for these subtle insults that I think have just been allowed to perpetuate over so many generations. And so it really awakened, my belief that as people of color and as an Asian American woman that, I can't just stand, idly by, even if there's not overt racism, generated towards me, that I have a role and a responsibility to stand up for racism everywhere.
Racism.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did I say stand up for racism?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
stand up.
Yeah. Just like combat racism, even if it's not directed towards me, but that it's just important as Asian Americans to be allies to other communities of color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it seems like you did make friends with people of so many different backgrounds here. Can you tell us a bit more about your involvement with NAAP or any of the other community organizations here?
So NAAP is the National Association of Asian American Professionals, and I was lucky enough to be the president in 2009 to 2010. And it was it's a Pan-Asian Pan-Professional national organization. And what I really enjoyed about it was that it wasn't so niche in terms of like ethnic group or professional trade, that it was really about bringing Asian Americans, whatever your, ethnic lineage is, or even whatever your trade is, to come together as a group to work towards things like giving back to the community or just supporting each other through mentorship and just peer support through like social functions and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you remember some of the activities that you guys did while you were president of NAAP?
Yeah, I mean, one event I remember fondly was this, I guess what did we call it? It was a fundraiser ball type thing, and it was to work, and the monies that we raised went to the U.S. Commission for Refugees and Immigrants, and we had a silent auction, and we had a DJ, and we had and dancing, and it was just a lot of fun and for a good cause. Mm-hmm. Another fond memory I have is for us to get involved, not in a political group, but in just a citizen community voting drive. So, I mean, it really took our organization to another level besides just like leadership learning or social events, but actually thinking about like civic engagement as Asian Americans in this area. And it wasn't political in terms of like picking parties or anything, but it was just really getting Asian Americans out there to vote, and that was very meaningful and to me, and I think it was a great experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And then you also got involved with a bunch of other organizations, right? Like there was Dragon Boat Racing and probably some sort of diversity committee within the Duke Raleigh Hospital. Yeah. Can you tell us more about those other activities?
Oh, sure. So I was the diversity chair. I was the chair of the diversity leadership team at Duke Raleigh Hospital. And, we were a volunteer group that met every month, and we organized things like lunch and learn series around subtle bias, racism, microaggressions, how to address microaggressions. We organized community events such as bringing in Dr. Damon Tweedy, who is the author of Black Man in a White Coat, as well as doing a poverty simulation with members of our team, and also the two other hospitals in Wake County, their diversity team members. So just to understand just levels of poverty and the impact in your day-to-day. And then I think also just making diversity in the hospital and in the health system a priority is, I think, such a big part of the work, not just organizing events, but also making sure that leaders are accountable to looking at like hiring practices and retention rates and who, the makeup or the demographic makeup of people in leadership. And then, thinking about how do we support and mentor people of color through the pipeline so that they feel like they can be in positions of leadership and that they belong at the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a big employer, right?
Yeah.
So did your diversity group have, say, like close to 100 members? It sounds like it was a pretty big organization to hold such big events.
Yeah, our team was, probably about, 16 people, but we did a lot, and I think that we got a lot of involvement within the hospital, and I think that also had to do with that we were very well supported by the senior executive team to, do what we do and see if we can engage as many community members and as many employees as we could. So that was a very, fulfilling experience in terms of, getting the support from leadership, but also just engaging, our fellow coworkers to talk about, things like, when you've been microaggressed upon or just actively talk about racism and just increase this notion or pay attention to this notion of belonging and that you matter, whatever group that you belong in, whether it's like your job title, whether it's your gender, whether it's your race, whether it's your sexual orientation, but that, really pushing the message that we all deserve respect, no matter what.
What, just in case people don't understand, what's microaggression? You've mentioned that a bunch of times.
Yeah, so microaggressions are these subtle insults that are, either they're not overtly kind of targeted towards any sort of ism, but they're these comments that leave you feeling like, was that an insult, or was that, that just kind of chips away at your, just like your
self-esteem.
Yeah, your self-esteem, or
sense
just
of
like
comfort and belonging.
Exactly. So it's not like overtly something that you address, but it's like, and it can happen daily. It can happen. It actually often happens daily, and it's just day after day or year after year, it just builds up, and then it's an interaction or it's a statement that just kind of like leaves you like kind of festering, like thinking like,
wait a second.
What did
that
they actually?
wasn't-
Yeah.
What stereotypes do they have?
Right, or it's like a
That's
subtle
right.
insult.
Yeah, like there was a male attorney who actually was a person of color himself who asked me on a phone conference if I was a paralegal or a legal assistant when we were in on some sort of committee phone conference. Of course, this was quite a while ago when I was pretty young, but still, I felt insulted.
Right.
It's like you assume that I'm like a legal assistant or a paralegal because, I'm a sort of young-sounding Asian woman.
But I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
totally
That is a great
understand.
example
Yeah.
of a microaggression.
Yeah, where people just kind of give you an impression that you're not really part of us, or you don't belong, or
make this
stereotyping you.
negative assumption about you.
Yeah.
And then I think also the skill to, as people of color, when we get these insults, oftentimes we internalize them and we are left with the work of trying to figure out like how to reconcile that. Like it was insulting, I'm mad about it, what do I do about it? And then sometimes we just don't do anything about it, but it still kind of lingers.
Yeah.
So, one of the biggest things that I pushed with the diversity team was to bring in curriculum or education around like actually how do you handle and how do you address a microaggression so you can move through it so that you're not festering, and that as human beings we are learning how to work through conflict around uncomfortable topics like race or sexual like orientation or gender discrimination. So just really give people skills, and actually we had a great learning series where we actually had scripting, not just like what is a microaggression, but actually as a person who has been aggressed upon, what can you do to like stop, slow down the biology of being insulted, and then thinking about what you want to do to handle the situation, and then also like giving people examples of saying to the other person, and they might not have meant it, or they might have meant it, but to not just let it just sit, that as two people to work through an issue, and then that's, I think, just naively, I think how we are going to improve humanity.
Yeah, great. That's a good explanation. So, and then of course we've mentioned the dragon boat racing. Can you tell us how you got into that?
Yeah, so dragon boat. So I was part of the Raleigh Dragon Boat Club, and I think NAAP was, supporting the club in its infancy in terms of getting the word out and membership, and then the club launched in terms of got its own boat and got a space to practice, and so it was a great time to be part of this team. It's a gigantic boat that has like it's in the shape of a dragon, where it has a dragon head in the front and a tail in the back, and then 10 rows in the middle, and then you have you're sitting side by side with someone, and then you paddle and then you race,
and you have to be in sync and be fit and cooperate. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, and then the races were definitely very thrilling, and it was just, it truly is about in the boat, you really, because it's such a close quarter that you actually really feel everybody's synergy, whereas like if someone's off timing, it just affects other things, and if people's head, all the paddlers' heads aren't in, kind of, they say in the boat during a race, it can actually break down pretty quick because we're so dependent on each other in terms of timing and power, and so it's a great experience.
Now we're here with your piles of boxes as you get ready to leave us for Boston. So can you just sum up briefly your feelings about your experiences here living in the Triangle area?
Sure. I would say that it has really been a tremendous experience in terms of, when I first arrived with no children, and just connecting to the Asian American community here has been, just like so fulfilling. And then getting connected to NAAP has been a great experience. And then, as our families have grown, to just maintain these relationships has been the probably the highlight of my time here. Just, being such a bright, compassionate, just awesome people, and just maintaining those friendships over so many years here has been a true gift.
Yeah. Well, we hope you'll come back and visit often, or else we'll go visit you in Boston. So thank you so much for being part of this episode, and hopefully we'll have some more episodes of Asian American Focus sooner than later.
Thank you.